90-Day Fiancé The Other Way, Season 7, Episode 18, which aired on January 5th, 2025, delivered one of the most emotionally complex and quietly powerful moments of the season. Unlike many reality television episodes that rely on raised voices, dramatic exits, or shocking confrontations, this installment focused on something far more delicate and difficult to repair: trust. The emotional weight of the episode came not from chaos, but from honesty, vulnerability, and the lingering consequences of past choices. The episode marked a significant turning point for Madelein, one of the most closely followed cast members of the season. For the first time, she met Jim, the father of her partner, Luke, in person. What began as a seemingly normal meeting between a future daughter-in-law and her partner's parent quickly evolved into a deeply personal conversation. As the discussion unfolded, themes of infidelity, emotional distance, fear of repeated mistakes, and the lasting scars left by betrayal took center stage, casting uncertainty over the couple's future. For Madeleine, this meeting carried far more meaning than a simple introduction. Jim was not just Luke's father, he was the man who raised him, influenced his values, and shaped the person Madeleine had fallen in love with. Sitting across from him meant confronting the roots of Luke's behavior, including the mistakes that had already damaged their relationship. From the beginning, Madeleine appeared cautious but sincere. She was clearly trying to balance respect with truth. She did not want to come across as suspicious or ungrateful, yet she could not ignore the emotional pain Luke's past infidelity had caused her. Those wounds had not healed, and they continued to affect how she viewed both Luke and their future together. Throughout the season, Madeleine had consistently chosen openness, even when it made her uncomfortable. This conversation was no different. Rather than hiding her fears to keep the peace, she spoke honestly, knowing that silence would only deepen her doubts and emotional distance. Despite her deep love for Luke and her desire to build a life with him, Madeleine explained that trust no longer came naturally. Luke's past cheating had permanently altered her sense of safety in the relationship. What once felt secure now felt uncertain, as though the foundation beneath them had cracked. She shared how rebuilding trust after betrayal is never easy, but doing so in a long-distance relationship made the process even more painful. Physical separation left too much room for doubt and imagination. "We are in a distant relationship, so the trust is so difficult to get, but so easy to lose. You're never going to know exactly what the other," Madeleine said, her voice trailing off. Her unfinished sentence spoke volumes. The words faded away just as her certainty had. The lack of closure mirrored her emotional reality, trust that was incomplete, fragile, and still under construction. She explained that distance magnified every insecurity. Without daily physical presence, small moments took on greater meaning. A delayed reply, a missed call, or an unfamiliar name could quickly trigger fear. When reassurance is limited, the mind fills in the gaps, and not always kindly. Still, Madeleine made one thing clear: her love for Luke was real. "I love it to spend the rest of my life with him, and I think I make a choice to really love him no matter what. But the relationship we have is not perfect, and I get scared sometimes." Her words were not polished, but they were deeply sincere. She was not pretending that love alone could erase betrayal. Instead, she acknowledged that loving Luke was an intentional decision, one that required courage, patience, and emotional risk, especially after being hurt. Then she returned to the incident that had shaken her confidence the most. "What happened with the trip, the trust I have in him is lost a little bit. I be honest, really." This admission marked a turning point. Madeleine was no longer trying to soften her feelings. She openly acknowledged that something inside her had changed and that rebuilding trust would take time, if it was possible at all. Jim listened carefully, responding not with defensiveness, but with surprising openness. He acknowledged Luke's mistake and then revealed something deeply personal, his own past with infidelity. He has cheated, but when he was younger. Jim explained that he too made serious mistakes in his youth. He spoke candidly about being unfaithful before finding the woman he truly loved. According to him, that moment changed everything. One thing I can promise you is that he hasn't even thought about cheating. He takes after me. I was like that. But when I found the right one, that was the end. I've never cheated on my wife. Ever. Jim's intention was clear. He wanted Madelein to believe that people can grow, mature, and leave their past behind. He hoped his own story would reassure Madelein that Luke's earlier mistakes didn't define who he was today. However, the effect was unexpected. Instead of calming her fears, Jim's confession intensified them. Madelein admitted that learning Luke's father had also cheated made her even anxious. Rather than seeing proof of change, she saw the possibility of repetition. She explained her belief that infidelity often follows a pattern, that once someone crosses that boundary, it becomes easier to cross again. A tiger's son comes out painted. Her words reflected a deeply rooted fear that behavior can repeat itself across generations, even unintentionally. Once again, Madelein returned to the central issue haunting their relationship: distance. Being physically apart made trust feel unstable and fragile. Without shared daily experiences or physical reassurance, doubt quietly settled in. Each day apart became another opportunity for fear to grow. She emphasized that trust in a long-distance relationship is not automatic. It must be built slowly, consistently, and often painfully. Jim listened carefully and tried to reassure her once more. He insisted that Luke had never loved anyone the way he loved Madelein. According to him, Luke's desire to marry her was not impulsive. It was thoughtful, intentional, and sincere. He emphasized that there was no one else in Luke's life, no distractions, no hidden alternatives. Then, Jim asked a direct and difficult question. Could she trust Luke? Madelein answered honestly. She said trust could not be forced or rushed. It was a process, one that required time, patience, and proof through actions. Later, in his private confessional, Jim reflected on the conversation. He acknowledged that jealousy can be destructive and, if left unchecked, can slowly tear a relationship apart. He admitted that Luke had made mistakes, decisions that could not simply be erased. Still, he ended on a hopeful note. Jim stated that the best decision Luke had ever made was choosing to marry Madelein. The episode offered no easy resolutions or perfect answers. Instead, it presented something far more real: two people trying to navigate love after betrayal, across distance, with fear and hope existing hand in hand. Madelein's struggle was not about drama or attention. It was about emotional survival. 2025 delivered one of the most emotionally layered and quietly intense conversations of the entire season. Rather than focusing on loud confrontations, heated arguments, or dramatic ultimatums, the episode centered on something far more fragile and difficult to rebuild: trust. The moment stood out because it reflected real emotional struggles rather than manufactured reality TV drama. The episode highlighted a crucial turning point for Madelein, one of the season's most discussed cast members, as she finally came face-to-face with Jim, the father of her partner, Luke. What initially appeared to be a routine and polite meeting between a future daughter-in-law and her partner's parent quickly shifted into a deeply personal and emotionally charged discussion. Topics such as infidelity, emotional distance, fear of repeating past mistakes, and the lasting impact of broken trust took center stage, casting a long shadow over the couple's future. Madelein meets Luke's father. For Madelein, meeting Jim was far more than a simple family introduction. It carried emotional weight, pressure, and quiet nervousness. She was meeting the man who raised Luke, the person whose beliefs, life experiences, and past decisions had played a role in shaping the man she loved. That reality alone made the encounter emotionally intense. From the very beginning of their conversation, it was evident that Madeleine was carefully balancing honesty with respect. She did not want to seem ungrateful, disrespectful, or overly suspicious. At the same time, she could not ignore the emotional wounds left behind by Luke's past infidelity. Those scars were still present, influencing how she viewed their relationship and their future together. As the discussion progressed, Madeleine continued to do what she had consistently done throughout the season, speak openly about her emotions, even when it left her exposed and vulnerable. She chose honesty over comfort, knowing that avoiding the truth would only deepen her fears. The weight of infidelity. Madeleine explained that despite loving Luke deeply and imagining a future with him, trust did not come easily. Luke's previous cheating had permanently altered her sense of security in the relationship. The betrayal had cracked the foundation they once stood on, making every step forward feel uncertain. She shared how incredibly difficult it was to rebuild trust once it had been damaged, especially given the fact that they were in a long-distance relationship. We are in a distant relationship, so the trust is so difficult to get, but so easy to lost. You're never gonna know exactly what the other, said Madeleine. Her words faded before she could complete the thought, perfectly capturing the uncertainty she lived with every day, the broken trust she was still struggling to repair. Distance, she explained, intensified every insecurity. When partners are not physically together, imagination often fills the gaps. A delayed message, an unanswered call, or an unfamiliar name could quickly spiral into fear. Without daily reassurance, doubt found room to grow. Loving despite fear. Despite all her fears, Madeleine made one thing very clear. She loved Luke and wanted to spend her life with him. I love it, to spend the rest of my life with him, and I think I make a choice to really love him no matter what. But the relationship we have are perfect, and I get a little bit scares. Her words were not polished, but they were emotionally honest. Madeleine was not claiming that love alone could fix everything. Instead, she acknowledged that loving someone, especially after being hurt, was a deliberate and courageous decision that required vulnerability and emotional risk. She then returned to the incident that had shaken her trust the most. What happened with the tripper, the trust I have in him is lost it a little bit. I be honest, really. This moment was significant because Madeleine was no longer trying to protect anyone's feelings. She admitted that something inside her had changed and that rebuilding trust would not be quick or easy. Jim shares his past. Jim listened carefully and responded with unexpected openness rather than defensiveness. He acknowledged Luke's past mistake and then surprised Madeleine by sharing his own experience. He has cheated, but when he was younger. Jim explained that he too made poor choices in his youth. He spoke candidly about being unfaithful before finding the right partner. According to him, meeting the person he truly loved changed everything. One thing I can promise you, that he hasn't even thought about cheating. He takes after me like that. I was like that, but when I found the right one, that was the end. I've never cheated on my wife, ever. Jim's intention was to reassure Madeleine, to show her that people are capable of growth and change, and that Luke's past did not define who he was now. Madeleine's fear grew. Ironically, Jim's honesty had the opposite effect on Madeleine. Instead of easing her concerns, it made them stronger. Learning that Luke's father had also cheated caused her to worry even more. She admitted that it reinforced her belief that infidelity often follows a pattern, that once someone crosses that boundary, it becomes easier to cross it again. A tiger's son comes out painted, confessed Madeleine. Her words reflected a deep fear that behavior can be inherited or repeated, even unintentionally. Distance makes everything harder. Madeleine once again returned to the core issue haunting her relationship, the distance. Being physically apart made trust feel unstable and fragile. Without everyday moments together or physical reassurance, doubts quietly took hold. Each day apart became another opportunity for fear to grow. She emphasized that trust in a long-distance relationship is not automatic. It must be built slowly, often painfully, through consistency and effort. Jim reassures her. Jim listened closely and tried to comfort her once more. He told Madeleine that Luke had never loved anyone like he loved her. According to him, Luke's desire to marry her was thoughtful, intentional, and deeply meaningful. He insisted there was no one else in Luke's life, no distractions, no alternatives, no hidden intentions. Jim then asked a direct and difficult question. Could she trust Luke? Madeleine answered honestly, saying that trust was not something that could be forced or rushed. It was a process that required time. Jim's private confession. Later, in his private confessional, Jim reflected on the conversation. He acknowledged that jealousy can be destructive and, if left unchecked, can tear even strong relationships apart. He admitted that Luke had made mistakes in the past, decisions that could not simply be erased. Still, Jim ended on a hopeful note, stating that the best decision Luke had ever made was wanting to marry Madeleine. Closing tone. This episode offered no simple solutions or perfect endings. Instead, it presented something deeply real. Two people trying to navigate love after betrayal, across distance, with fear and hope existing side by side. Madeleine's struggle was not driven by drama. It was about the survival of trust. And in 90 Day Fiancé the Other Way, Season 7, Episode 18, viewers were reminded that sometimes the hardest part of love is not choosing someone, but finding the strength to believe in them again. A distant relationship, trust, infidelity, and fear on 90 Day Fiancé the Other Way. 90 Day Fiancé the Other Way, Season 7, Episode 18, released on January 5, 2025, delivered one of the most emotionally layered conversations of the season, one that revolved not around explosive arguments or dramatic ultimatums, but around something far more fragile: trust. The episode featured a pivotal moment for Madeleine, one of the season's most talked about cast members, as she finally met Luke's father, Jim, face to face. What initially appeared to be a standard introductory meeting between a future daughter-in-law and her partner's parent quickly evolved into a deeply personal and emotionally charged discussion about infidelity, distance, fear, and the long shadow that past mistakes can cast over a relationship. Madeleine meets Luke's father. For Madeleine, meeting Jim was not just another step in her relationship with Luke. It was a moment filled with pressure, uncertainty, and quiet anxiety. She was meeting the man who raised the person she loved, the man whose values, experiences, and history had inevitably shaped Luke. From the beginning of their conversation, it was clear that Madeleine was trying to balance respect with honesty. She did not want to appear ungrateful or overly suspicious, yet she could not ignore the emotional scars left by Luke's past infidelity. As the conversation unfolded, Madeleine spoke openly about her feelings, something she has consistently tried to do throughout the season, even when it left her emotionally exposed. The weight of infidelity. Madeleine explained that although she loved Luke deeply and envisioned a future with him, trust did not come easily. Luke had cheated before, and that betrayal had fundamentally changed the way she viewed their relationship. She shared how difficult it was to rebuild trust when the foundation had already been cracked, especially when their relationship was long distance. We are in a distant relationship, so the trust is so difficult to get, but so easy to lose. You never gonna to know exactly what the other, said Madeleine. Her words trailed off, reflecting the uncertainty she felt. The sentence itself felt unfinished, much like the trust she was still struggling to rebuild. Distance, she explained, magnified every doubt. When you are not physically present with your partner, imagination fills the gaps. Every unanswered message, every delayed response, every unfamiliar name becomes a potential threat. Loving despite fear. Despite her fears, Madeleine made one thing very clear. She loved Luke and wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. I love it to spend the rest of my life with him, and I think I make a choice to really love him no matter what. But like the relationship we have don't are perfect, and I get a little bit scarce. Her words were imperfect, but her emotions were unmistakably raw. She was not pretending that love alone solved everything. Instead, she acknowledged that loving someone, especially after betrayal, was a conscious choice, one that required vulnerability and risk. Then she revisited the moment that had shaken her faith the most. What happened with the tripper, the trust I have in him is lost it a little bit. I don't. I be honest, really. This admission was significant. Madeleine was not hiding behind politeness or optimism. She was admitting that despite her love, something inside her had changed. Jim shares his own past. Listening carefully, Jim responded not with defensiveness, but with his own story. He acknowledged Luke's past infidelity and then surprised Madeleine by revealing his own history. He has cheated, but when he was younger. Jim explained that he too had made mistakes in his youth. He spoke honestly about being unfaithful before he found the right partner. But once he found her, everything changed. One thing I can promise you, that he hasn't even thought about cheating. He takes after me like that. I was like that. But when I found the right one, that was the end. I've never cheated on my wife, ever. Jim's intention was clear, to reassure Madeleine that people can change and that Luke's past did not define his future. Madeleine's fear grows. Ironically, Jim's confession had the opposite effect on Madeleine. Instead of calming her fears, it deepened them. After learning that Luke's father had also cheated in the past, Madeleine admitted that she felt even more worried. She explained her belief that infidelity often follows a pattern, that once someone crosses that line, it becomes easier to cross it again. A tiger's son comes out painted, confessed Madeleine. Her statement reflected a deeply rooted fear that behavior is inherited, repeated, and difficult to escape. Distance makes everything harder. Then Madeleine returned to the core issue haunting her relationship with Luke, the distance. She explained to Jim that being physically apart made trust feel fragile and unstable. Without shared daily experiences, without physical reassurance, doubt grows silently. Every moment apart becomes an opportunity for fear to creep in. She emphasized that trust in a long-distance relationship was not a given. It was something that had to be built slowly, often painfully. Jim reassures her. Jim listened carefully and responded with reassurance. He told Madeleine that Luke had never loved anyone like he loved her. He emphasized that Luke's decision to marry her was not impulsive, it was intentional and deeply meaningful. According to Jim, there was no one else in Luke's life, no distractions, no alternatives. Then he asked her a direct and difficult question. Could she trust Luke? Madeleine's response was honest and measured. She said that trust was a process, not something that could be demanded or rushed. Jim's private confession. Later, in his private confessional, Jim reflected on the conversation. He acknowledged that jealousy is dangerous, capable of tearing even the strongest relationships apart if left unchecked. He admitted that Luke had made bad decisions in the past, bad decisions that could not be erased, but he ended on a powerful note. Jim stated that the best decision Luke had ever made was wanting to marry Madeleine. Closing tone.